I'm Judd Myers.
I'm Scott Tipton.
Welcome to Blastoff.
Welcome to the Blastoff podcast. I'm Scott Tipton.
I'm Judd Myers.
Today will be one of our conversation shows, and the gentleman we want today, well, let's go about it a different way. The world is moving in a different direction with content these days, with movies, with music. And not to sound like a grumpy old man, but I'm against it. I'm a guy who likes having an archive. I like having a library of books. I like having a library of films. I want the media in my hand. I want to own it. I don't trust the fact that if I pay for streaming, the movie I want is always going to be there, because sometimes it's not. And I'm like Daffy Duck. I want to hoard my media in my greedy little cave, like a greedy little coward I am. I need the media in my hand. And one of the things I've loved so much about the DVD and Blu-ray revolution, which I think is now probably not so much of a revolution anymore with the advent of streaming, is there was for such a long time the notion of bonus content, additional content, commentary tracks, behind the scenes, blooper reels. It's kind of film school for folks who didn't go to film school. I learned more from the commentary track of Nicholas Meyer's Wrath of Khan than I did in my entire film classes, because it's just him talking about how he does storytelling. I took away so much from that. And I had no idea that our guest today, Michael Stratford, basically was the guy who introduced this concept of bonus content for media to the market.
Yeah. What's great about him is that, and you have a love of that, I have a love of 70s funk radio. And he was part of that cutting edge. Coming from the East Coast to the West Coast, Quincy Jones brought him out here to create a radio station. And so going back, he was a guy who was bringing content to Los Angeles that they never heard before, an East Coast funk sensibility here to California. It was only logical that this guy would make a jump into something else, saying, all right, I want to be at the forefront of something new. And if everybody out there thinks about the last, 10, 15 years of DVDs that came out of, added content of your favorite action movie, your favorite superhero movie, fantasy, it's likely that Mike had some kind of hand in it, very often all of his hands in it, and was coming up with ideas for this added content, not just interviews, but other things, digging into the archives and really, using what he had at his fingertips. So the fact that he's had his hands in so many, not just film archives, but music archives, he really has seen things and heard things that so many other people, most other people, haven't. And he reveals some of those things in our interview. It's nice to sort of look inside from another aspect of the creative entertainment industry. It's not just, hey, this thing got made. It's then what? It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoys it. Today's guest on the podcast is Michael Stradford. He's an entertainment industry executive for the last 3 decades, spanning through music, radio, DVD, film, television, interactive entertainment. He's at Warner Home Entertainment as Director of Creative Services right now, but before that, he was at Big Air Studios, which was a film distribution company. And before that, he led the digital production and development team for Crackle at Sony Pictures. He produced groundbreaking digital movie projects, Angel of Death, Abandoned Way, won awards for that. He's progressive, and he's done some extraordinary things. He's a pioneer for all kinds of added value space material for DVDs at a time where people didn't even know what that was. He's worked with all kinds of Hollywood stars, Warren Beatty, Paul Newman, Spike Lee, Kevin Smith, Robert De Niro, all kinds of people. And before any of this, even before any of this, he was in the radio business for 12 years. He started The Beat, the important LA radio station, in the late 70s into the early 80s. And he also worked for Quincy Jones as a record executive at Quest Records. This man has done a lot. It's extraordinary to have him. He's got a lot to tell, and hopefully it's a little bit inspirational for everybody who is thinking of making a jump from one type of entertainment experience to another. This man has done it. First thing I want to know is, and this is like really, really important, the first comic book you ever read.
Wow. I can't tell you with exact certainty, but I can get pretty close. When I was growing up in Cleveland, my dad owned a delicatessen. And when you're a small independent shop, you would go to a self-serve wholesale facility to get your cigarettes, to get your cereals, to get all your supplies. And as you go through the entire facility, just before you get to the cashier, there would be a section with comic books. And there would be a stack about almost a foot high with the tops of the covers taken off. And you could get a stack for like 80 cents. And he didn't sell comics in the store.
So there were strip covers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I remember the first time he brought home a batch, and I hadn't read a comic book, and I was 8 maybe. And it was either Marvel Collector's Item or Fantasy Masterpieces. Mm. So it reprinted early Steve Ditko Spider-Man, and Fantasy Masterpieces reprinted Golden Age Captain America. And from that, I was hooked. And so then I would go down. There was a drugstore a couple blocks from my dad's deli, and they carried new comics. So for 12 cents, and they get them in every week. So I would go in, and I just started collecting, and that was it. But and everything: Marvel, DC, Archie, Harvey, Gold Key, Dell, all that stuff.
And like, were your parents cool with it? Like, were you? Because some parents are like, what are you doing? You spend your allowance on.
Yeah, well, my dad didn't get it, but he saw that I enjoyed it and I read, and he saw that it activated an interest in reading. So while he didn't get it, he was like, well, at least he's reading. And my mom was supportive. She's like, hey, whatever, that's what you like, that's fine.
Were you an only kid? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I was an only kid. And my folks had been married 18 years before I was born. So, it was a whole other thing for them. Just like, what do we do? How do we do this thing?
And did you continued reading, you continued, collecting. Did you have friends out in Cleveland that were like, hey, comic books? Or
no, that's the funny thing. I didn't have any friends that were into comic books. There was one kid when I was in grade school, named Rufus. He used to draw comic strips, but I didn't have any friends that were into comics. But, I got so just wound up with comics I remember I was a kid. I was maybe 10 or 11, and I would always see Stan Lee's name, in the front of the Marvel books. And it'd always be Smiling Stan Lee or something Stan Lee, some type of adjective Stan Lee. And he was the connecting thread for me across all the Marvel comics. And one day my parents went out and my uncle was babysitting, and he's downstairs in the bar having a sip, watching a game or something. And I got on the phone and I dialed New York Information and asked for Stan Lee. And, of course they didn't, they weren't able to connect me with him. But when I met him years later, when I worked at Sony, I told him that story. I said, when I was a kid, I called New York Information trying to find you. And Stan said, Mike, I wish you would have found me. Might have made a big difference.
How long before you left Cleveland did you grew up until like what age?
I graduated from high school when I was 17. Then I went to the University of Toledo. So that was in 76.
So during that time, you were reading comics. Friends weren't really into it. I mean, you're a tall guy. You were probably tall then. I can't imagine that you were someone that you were an outcast because of the fact that you were reading comics.
No, I never really fit in because I didn't try to, so I didn't drink, I didn't smoke cigarettes, I didn't get high, I didn't do any of that stuff. I think one of the most valuable things my mother gave me early on, she instilled an idea of, walk your own path. Your own path is interesting. It's more interesting than trying to be like everybody else. So I just kind of did what I thought I should do for me. And I still made friends. I had good friends. I have friends from junior high and high school that I'm still close with today, And so the other kids that didn't really get it, it was okay. It was fine. First comic book convention I went to in Cleveland, I went by myself, and I had the best time ever,
What about movie, TV? Like, were you music? Now you're all pop culture all the time.
Right.
Back then, were you putting that together already, or
kind of, sort of? I mean, growing up as an only child, and my dad owned the deli, and my mother worked in the deli with him. So I spent a lot of time by myself, so comics, movies, television, just had a lot of fascination for me. And so the more time I spent, the more interested I got. And then when I got interested in the process, who is this guy that I keep seeing starring in this movie? Or Jack Kirby, I see his name on almost every comic book. Who is this guy? So the more I got into it, it was just like a deeper dive that you just continue to do. I remember going in a bookstore called Publix when I was a kid. I went in with my mom, and she was looking around, and I'm looking around, and I see this book with this really primitive picture of Superman on the cover. And I had never seen a hardbound book in a bookstore with a superhero on the cover. And I picked the book up, and it was Jules Pfeiffer's The Great Comic Book Heroes.
Oh, wow.
And I looked through there, and here's the origin of Batman, and the origin of the Human Torch, and the Spirit, who I had never heard of, and Captain Marvel. And all of a sudden, I find out that comic books were happening in the 40s. That just blew my mind, So then I became consumed by Golden Age, the idea of Golden Age, which I couldn't afford any of those books, but that and All in Color for a Dime, gave me more of a sense of history. And then Steranko came out with the history of comics, and I was just undone, So, it was easy for me to entertain myself because things that I was interested in and like comics, like movies, like music, when you get interested to the extent that it's more than just the material itself, it's the creators of the material and what their influences were, then you just start finding out more and more and more about different things. So it's just not a lot of time to be bored, So I was fine by myself a lot.
So even back then, you were a researcher.
Yeah,
you like to dig around and see what the history was of things.
Yeah.
You used that well later on. It must have. Talking about music and radio, I mean, you've talked about this a lot before. I don't want to cover old ground, but it's a little daunting for me sitting here interviewing you with a microphone here for all of the years of your life of microphones and headsets and recording things. And you go into radio at a time where radio was like the Wild West. I mean, there was all kinds of things happening in radio. People were trying things, people were failing, people were trying other things. And you jumped in there and did some very interesting things, became a programmer, programming stations, which is everything. You're not just a DJ, you're a builder. You build a structure.
Right.
Was that something that you thought that's something I wanted to do? Not at all.
I mean, originally when I went to college, I wanted to be an artist because I used to draw a lot. I drew a lot. And once I got to college and I was with real artists, I was like, oh my God, I just don't think I can do this, But University of Toledo was a solid school for fine arts, but it didn't have the type of focus on art that I had hoped that it would have, because I think had I been exposed to graphic design, had I been exposed to commercial design, I probably would have stuck to it. But I just went with, this is what I love. I love to draw, and maybe there's a career out of this. And I saw guys and girls that would just blow me out of the water, half asleep drawing and sketching. So I realized pretty quickly, and my father was never really crazy about it, because it's like, how are you going to make any money as an artist? You know, he was a very practical guy, you know, came up self-made man, and limited education, incredible business sense and common sense, you know. So things were all generally black and white for him. Art was really kind of an intangible, but he was supportive. But once I realized that art wasn't a real opportunity for me, I floundered for a minute, because I was like, damn, what am I going to do? And a buddy mentioned to me one day, he said, well, you love music. You know more about music than most people I know, and you've got a good voice. Why don't you try radio? And I was like, why not? So I got a job at the school radio station. I was a jock, I think, twice a week. And then I changed my major into broadcasting. And I was able to get a part-time job at the R&B station in Toledo, WKLR. And I enjoyed it. I dug it. But I knew pretty quickly that I would never be a great jock, because I had a good voice, but it was hard for me to just stay that concentrated and that focused for those 4 hours, just coming in every 3.5 minutes to say 10 or 15 seconds worth of stuff. But I liked radio. And so I was able to get involved with working with the music director there. So I got more involved with dealing with record executives when they would come in to try to get their records on the list. And I get involved with the research and request lines and record sales. And so when I was, this is funny, when I was close to graduating from college, there was our news director sent an air check off, because she was trying to get a job in Cincinnati. And an air check, for those of you much too young to know what that is, essentially it's an audition tape to get a job. So you would take your voice, the beginning of a record, and then you would stop it just as the vocal came in. Excuse me. You would stop it just as the vocal came in, and then it would pick back up as the song was ending and your voice came on. So it's essentially a 4-minute audition of your voice, how you sound on the radio. And then when you send it to a program director, they could listen to it and they could tell, yeah, this guy fits what we're trying to do, or he could fit what we're trying to do. So Jill Frost, our news director, had sent her air check to a radio station in Cincinnati, an AM station. And they hired her, which was great. And I had a roommate at the time in college. And I remember my roommate coming in, and I had taken a nap on the sofa. And I said, I had a crazy dream. I dreamed that the guy that hired Jill called me and offered me a job because my voice is on the end of her audition tape. And I told him I was taking a nap, call me back. And we both laughed, and then the phone rang.
And that's what happened.
That was what happened. Yeah. It was not a dream. It was real. So he called, he said, hey, I heard you wanted to offer you a job. You're doing overnights. And I said, man, I'm 8 weeks away from getting my diploma. I got to get this diploma. And he said, well, I'll try to hold the job. Call me when you're 3 weeks out. And I was 3 weeks out. He held the job, and I packed my stuff day after graduation, drove to Cincinnati, and started as a jock full time.
Wow. So you got headhunted from
inadvertently. Yeah.
So there you were, you're in a new place.
Dude, I was making $200 a week, working midnight to 4, having the time of my life. I mean, they were just, I was the youngest guy at the radio station. The radio station was a community-oriented station that had been there a long time, so we were always doing things. And we had an FM sister station with the coolest, smoothest jocks ever. And the program director said, I want you to be here on the AM for a year, and then we're going to move you to the FM. I'm like, I can't work with those guys. Are you kidding? But it was a blast, and it was one of those things where the environment and the opportunity and the people, it was just that rare perfect storm where it was just good. And the music, I mean, this was 1981, so the music was just sublime.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of great stuff, and yeah, I mean, I always look back on those days with a lot of love.
Yeah, it sounds like Carl Gottlieb talked about immersion. He said the best way to learn anything is to immerse yourself in it completely and do that every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Better than any class or anything you could search out. And you say, there you are. What was it, like 12 years in radio?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you were in it all the time.
Pretty much. And the thing is, when I look back, the money was never an issue. As time went on, I mean, each market you leave, you get to a bigger market, so you make more money. Mm. But it was never the issue. It just never was. I was grateful, but it was never the driver.
Because you loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if it's something you love so much, why leave?
Well, by the time I had Cincinnati, Detroit, St. Louis, Houston, I came out here to Los Angeles to launch The Beat, mm-hmm. which was the first time LA had an R&B station that covered the entire market, because most of the other stations had pretty poor signals. Stevie Wonder's got KJLH. He's owned it for over 30 years. And it's a nice station, but it's real spotty mm-hmm. in terms of coverage. And so when I came here, the radio station was in 31st place, and we took it to 12 in one rating book.
Wow.
With like no money. And we ultimately got up to number three. We couldn't beat Kiss and we couldn't beat Power, but we were making those inroads. But around the same time, gangster rap was becoming really prominent, really prevalent.
Yeah, I don't see that being your kind of thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I had much against it as much as it was the first time in my career that I just could not hear a hit with certainty.
Mm.
I mean, my ratio prior to gangster rap was really strong. 9 times out of 10, if I thought something was going to be a hit, it'd be a hit. I'd be right. And with rap, I just didn't have that same certainty. And
just go back, was there a song track that you listened to that you went, this has got to be a hit, and it wasn't?
I'm sure there was. You don't commit those to memory. But yeah, I mean, I like, there were artists, like I was always late on R. Kelly. Mm. I just could not hear that guy. And I would wait until just about the rest of the country would come in, and I'd be among the last radio stations to come in all the time because I just didn't hear it. So I guess he's the one that springs to mind. But, along with gangster rap was a proliferation of profanity and a proliferation of misogyny.
Hmm.
And, when I was coming up in radio, if a song said bitch or the N-word or hoe, we either bleep it, we loop it backwards, or we cut it out. Because R&B radio stations historically have a very large under 12-year-old audience.
Mm-hmm.
And they listen for long periods of the day. And I didn't want to be that guy that was supporting an idea of making it okay for those words to be heard on the radio on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. I just didn't want to do that. So just as I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? I get a call from Quincy Jones's office.
Oh, as one does.
Yeah.
Quincy's on the phone.
Yeah. And he wanted a meeting, and I'm like, okay, sure. And I went up to his house in Bel Air, and he said, hey, I've been watching your career in LA for the last 2 years, and I want to offer you a job heading up A&R because I want to do something different. I want somebody that doesn't have formal record company experience, so he's not hindered by his understanding of how the business should be. I want somebody with a different mindset, but can hear hit records. And was like, are you kidding? He's like, no, I'm serious. So I said, well, sounds really good. Let me think about it. Give me a weekend to think about it. And that weekend was Comic-Con with San Diego. And I'm down in San Diego. And I'll never forget, I go to the floor that first day. And I always have a great time in San Diego. And this is before it got so packed that you couldn't walk around. Thursday was like a breeze. And I come back to my room and there's a message, and it's from Quincy. He's like, Mike, I've been thinking about this. You got to do it. You got to come over. You got to come over. This is like a marriage. You can be the husband or the wife. I don't care what you call it, but you got to come over. So I'm at Comic-Con having a blast, and I get this impassioned call from Quincy Jones. And that was just like one of the great moments of my life.
Little Mike Stradford going, woo!
Yeah.
Riding down the street on his bicycle.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's great.
Yeah.
So did you have to go from like jeans and a t-shirt to wearing a suit?
No.
Or was it
No.
you had your own, you had autonomy?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about working for Quincy, and then when I worked for Sony, he understood you've got to be able to connect with talent. And so when you wear that suit and tie, you're immediately perceived by talent as a suit. You aren't perceived as somebody that can connect with them on a creative or an emotional level. Mm-hmm. And he was very adamant that however you want to do your office, knock yourself out. However you want to dress, knock yourself out. If you've got bad habits, try to lose them. If you don't have bad habits, try not to start any. And that was pretty much what I did. So there was never a barrier. And one of the things that was nice, a number of the artists that I had to work with, like Tevin Campbell, I knew him from my days at the radio station. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't starting from scratch in all of these relationships,
And you were with Quincy Jones for how long?
3.5 years. 3.5 years. And
I hear you say a lot, when I left Quest, and I'm curious because nobody asks why. I have not heard one person ask why.
It's really simple. His daughter said, Dad, everybody's too old. So he fired the entire company. And, it was 2 stages. He fired everyone except me and the publicist. And he called me and said, hey, I've got to make some changes. We're going to do a new Quest. You're going to be creatively, you're going to be the connection, the bridge between the old Quest and the new Quest. And, we're going to redo your deal. I'm like, well, okay, this is what it is. This is what it is. And I started getting calls from my artists saying, there's an artist development meeting and you weren't there. Why weren't you there? There's a marketing meeting. You weren't there. Why weren't you there? And so I called him and I said, hey, I need you to explain to me how this new Quest works, because meetings that it seems like I should be involved in, I'm not. And artists are calling me, asking me why I'm not there. And so I went up to the house and he said that, we're just hemorrhaging money and we need to make these changes and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, okay, it's your company. If that's what you got to do, it's okay. And so I was gone. The publicist was gone. He essentially installed his daughter to run the company, and it was dead in 18 months, But, when you deal with highly creative talent in a business capacity, there's just always that potential, and he and I are good. I saw him. I went to the house a couple of years ago to interview him for a book on Miles Davis that I'm doing. And I hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years. And it was supposed to be a 45-minute interview. I was there almost 4 hours.
Wow.
And it was good to see him. It's just one of those things, but it was a great experience. I mean, I had an opportunity to do things and go places and meet people that without that experience, it wouldn't have happened. To get a call on a Sunday night saying, Mike, you got to get on a plane and go to Winston-Salem in the morning. Okay, what am I doing? You're going to convince Maya Angelou to record this album set to music. I'm like, so I fly to Winston-Salem. She won't let me stay at a hotel. I stay at her house for 4 days. And she's a gourmet chef, and she cooked for me every night. Maya Angelou.
Oh, and the conversations.
Oh,
what
my
must
God,
the conversations have been?
Yeah. She'd go to Cleveland. She called my father. Yeah, it was. Stuff like that that's just beyond paycheck and work.
Yeah, of course.
So
again, now you say the same thing. It's beyond that. It's beyond money.
Exactly.
So there you are standing outside going, all right, yet again, what now?
Yeah, what now? So I'm on the beach chilling, trying to figure out what the next move is. And I had been writing some articles for this British film magazine called Impact. It was largely an action film magazine. And I had written a piece on Brandon Lee when he passed, because he had come to the radio station. We had him come by and do the morning show when he was promoting Rapid Fire. I went to the to the Shrine Comic Convention, the monthly show, and he was there to promote the movie. And I met his manager, and I told him about the radio station. I said, you should come by, put him on, blah, blah, blah. And our morning man, John London, was a mid-40-year-old white guy, and he had full autonomy of his show. And I said, hey, talk to Brandon Lee's people. I want you to put him on the air. And he's like, that he doesn't fit the format, da-da-da. I said, dude, if you were black in the 70s, there were 3 posters you had up in your room. Muhammad Ali, the Jackson 5, and Bruce Lee. And maybe Jim Brown, but that's the 60s. I said, if you put Brandon Lee on, the son of Bruce Lee, you don't have any idea what will happen. And he's like, yeah, okay. So Brandon came down, and the phones went crazy, and people were calling like, yo, money, your dad, respect. It's just over and over and over. And so when he passed, I wrote this article about the day that he came to the station, and just, the kind of guy he seemed to be. His mother saw the article, and she tracked me down and asked me to speak at a Bruce and Brandon Lee scholarship banquet in Torrance. Like, there is nothing Bruce Lee's widow could ask me to do that I would not do, And so I did that. And when it was over, Leif Adams, who was the head of Warner Brothers Archives, came over to me, and we just started talking. And he's like, so what are you doing now? I'm like, nothing right now. He said, why don't you come see me Monday? So I went to see him, and I walked out of there as manager of Warner Brothers Film Archives. And
and again,
and again. And so we were housed in a warehouse. Excuse me. We were housed in a warehouse by the Burbank Airport. Outside of my office were all 5 of the Batmobiles. The entire Warner Brothers history was just in this 75,000 square feet hangar. So it was joyous for me, as a hardcore movie fan. But I knew it wasn't going to be anything that I would do long term, but just to scratch an itch and to get into a film studio was cool. And, I was just open to see what would happen next. And then Sony happened next.
Going from the audio to the visual, which is actually kind of a big jump. It's very different. It's a different world altogether. You can't watch a movie with no sound, and you can't. It's like 2 different worlds together that have to be blended in order to make it work.
Kind of, sort of, but the place that I came from, and I was really fortunate with Sony. The guy that I interviewed with, Paul Kohlberg, had been a record company executive for like 25 years before he got in home entertainment. So he saw how the skills were transferable. So what Sony was looking for was somebody that could deal with talent, so that they could go out and create documentaries around the films and do audio commentaries and, all that type of stuff. So it's kind of going from dealing with crazy DJs and music to crazy recording artists and music to crazy filmmakers and movies, so it's different, but there's a similarity in terms of I think respect for the creative process, respect for the business end of it, and a passion that carried through, all those different genres.
The fact that you had your hands in the backlog of, so many extraordinary films in history, and to be able to watch them and take notes and ideas of what you could do to enhance them and give people more of an experience. You could have done that forever. There's so much. Or is it just you hit the end of an archive and you're like, well, I've pretty much had my hand in most of these great films, and now what? Now I got to go to something else?
Well, it's kind of two pieces. One is early on, like say the first 3, maybe 4 years, but definitely the first 3 years. You had mentioned the Wild Wild West earlier. DVD was totally the Wild Wild West. You call a filmmaker and you're like, DVD, what's that? So I would take a portable DVD player over with a screen and walk them through what it was and why it was beneficial for them to let us do whatever it is that we wanted to do. And at that time, it was an unknown commodity. The only thing that was known was that people were buying a lot of them, a lot of DVDs. And so I could pretty much do anything that I could conceptualize. But after it became product, and they had history to measure, then it wasn't as easy to do things for, say, a catalog title. Like I remember we did Lost Horizon, the classic Frank Capra movie, and we loaded that thing down. If we had waited 4 years to do it, there would have been nothing on it, because catalog, just aside from your crown jewels like Lawrence of Arabia, Tootsie, the catalog titles just don't move that much. So they wouldn't approve a significant budget to go and create supplemental material. So there was that. But I think the larger part of it was, by the time Blu-ray came around, I had pretty much done the entire Sony library. And so there was nothing to do with Blu-ray but do it again, and really more with smoke and mirrors than anything else. Because if you said, hey, we need a great version of Lawrence of Arabia, I'm going to do the best Lawrence of Arabia version I can.
Right.
So if you want me to do it again, it's like, well, I kind of did everything. So now it's a matter of trying to come up with something that you can put on the box that suggests that maybe there's something great there. But if it's great, I put it on the first time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I wasn't interested in the repetition, and I wasn't interested in hoodwinking the consumer to some degree, because I was a consumer. I still bought DVDs and music and comics, and I fell prey as a kid to, you see this beautiful John Buscema cover on a comic and you buy it without looking, and you get home, it's like, oh, this is a reprint. I've had this issue before. So I didn't want to do that. But fortunately, Sony was ready to try to make some strides in digital. So there was an opportunity to go over to Crackle and help launch that. And, we created a couple dozen web series, a couple that won some awards, and that was fun for 3 or 4 years.
I know that was sort of jumping in through the levels of your career and everything, but it's fascinating. You leave doing supplemental material to being a distributor.
Yeah.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, Sony had a mass layoff in 2010, and myself and a couple of other Sony colleagues were among that layoff. And one of the guys, Mike Arrieta, who was my boss at Crackle, and just a brilliant, scary visionary, said, hey, I'm going to start a distribution company. It's going to take me a minute to get the money up, but I got a seat at the table for you. I want you to be a partner, and blah, blah, blah. Great. So it took him about 9 months, and it was a big risk for me, because there was a job at Relativity that was in my lap, but I knew if I took it, and Mike called me a few months later with this opportunity with Big Air, that if I had a steady income and I had my benefits and I had my contract, the likelihood of me taking a shot at this really risky thing was slim. So I said, you know what? I'm not even going to get involved with relativity. I'm going to roll the dice with Mike, and when he gets some money straight, then I'll just go and do that, and it'll be whatever it's going to be. So as it turned out, you know, it didn't pay off, but you know, there are a few times in your life where, you know, there's a road you just have to make a choice.
Is that company still? Is it gone?
It's gone.
It's disbanded.
It's gone. Yeah. We had a good start. He brought a guy in who will go nameless. Not a bad guy, but his idea of direction didn't really jive with what it needed to be in order for us to stay alive. So it just, you know, I got out before the ship sunk all the way, but yeah, it didn't last a lot longer.
And you're back now. You're back at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And has a lot changed since you were doing this?
I don't know how much has changed. I think all the studios just have different processes, you know. So when I was at Sony, Ben Feingold, who was the president at the time, he really ran it like an entrepreneur. He took nothing and made just a ridiculous amount of money for the company, and so they pretty much left him alone. And so when he decided he wanted to start Screen Gems back up, revitalize that label, they said, yeah, okay, do what you want. And he started making these $3 or $4 or $5 million movies that would make $30 or $40 million at the box office. And he spread that entrepreneurial attitude throughout the company. So like while I was doing added value for DVD, he knew that I had interest in Hong Kong films and anime. And so he'd send me to Tokyo to find anime films, or he'd say, hey, what Hong Kong films are out there that we should grab that we don't have, you know? So I had an opportunity to do other things. And he really encouraged that type of free thinking. Warner's is a much more structured, traditional, departmentalized corporation, and it's worked for them. So it's different. It's different.
You've had a career of people recognizing your talent. You've had a lifetime of people going, I recognize who you are. Will you please? Which is pretty rare, but a testament to who you are. So here you are now doing this thing at Warner Brothers, and none of them are listening, so it doesn't matter. What do you want? What do you want to do? It can't be just this.
No, it's not. It's not. And that's something I'm trying to figure out, you know, because fortunately, particularly when I look back, I can see it, you know, the moves that I made were rarely based on money. They were based on interest. They were based on something that I thought I'd enjoy, or something that I thought it would be cool to learn about. So, yeah, I don't see Warner Brothers as being like the last stop, but I'm not really sure what's next. You know, I mentioned the Miles Davis book. I wrote that and actually met with the estate of Herman Leonard a couple days ago. He was a great rock and jazz photographer. Looks like they're going to make some photos available for us. And we've got to secure photo licenses from a number of photographers because it's a coffee table book, but it's been a project for a couple years. The book's written. I've done a couple dozen interviews ranging from Quincy to Lenny Kravitz to Brian Ferry to people that played with Miles to a couple of his wives. And that's nothing that I will get rich on when it's published, but it was just something that I wanted to do that I thought I'd enjoy doing. So I think I would like to continue the writing, but as far as how to turn that into a profit center, you know, I don't know. I do think as far as corporations go, Warner's is probably it. You know, it'll probably be the last run for me at that.
Yeah.
And I think there's opportunity for growth at Warner Brothers, and it's a good company. And I'm more involved now in the DC titles. I'm excited about Wonder Woman. Of course, I can't say anything about it, but I read the script and I quite like the script. I read Justice League and I'm working on that, and I quite like the script. The script is,
wow. Okay.
The script is it's
because you're very exacting. You do not say that lightly.
It's surprising. I mean, after Deadpool, everyone was saying that the DC movies were too dark and they need to lighten up, and I agree, particularly with Man of Steel. I think Man of Steel was a depressive film with a depressive Superman, and I felt bad for Cavill because I think I've seen him in things where he does have a light.
Oh, he's a good actor.
Yeah,
he really is.
Yeah, so it's nice in Justice League. There is a lightness that comes into his Superman that is earned. It's not like, well, okay, that must be the script note there. Look how he's acting now. It's actually earned, and the humor that pops through is natural for each of the characters. So it doesn't. When I read the script, it didn't feel like they were forcing humor, trying to make it work. It's all in line with how these characters would behave in this particular world. So, so I'm not mad at Warner's at all. I mean, I'm glad to be there. I think there's opportunities, but for growth. But I think that for my personal growth, it's got to be more than Warner's. I'm just not exactly sure what that is yet.
It really is kind of rare that people jump around like you did. Yeah. It's very hard to go from one thing to one type of art form to another type of art form and start a career over again, and then take it to its logical conclusion and then start again. Visionaries do that. So there's something that you haven't done yet. There's something brewing that you haven't done yet. That's going to be the start of. People should be following your taste.
I don't know about that.
Well, it leads me to, as far as I'm concerned, you're a historian. You have been documenting so much information for so long and learning about it and becoming an expert at it in different mediums. And now, you go online, you have your online blog, which is Looking for the Cool, and it sprung out of Tall Guy's Gear Guide.
Right.
Which wasn't supposed to be what it was, but it turned into something else.
True.
So the writing that you do, this pop culture writing that you do, is actually really great, and all of your readership are really into it. There's something there. I'd like more of it. I mean, I know that you're busy, but I feel like, man, there should be.
Yeah, I find with me in writing, when I force it, it reads that way. So there was a point when I launched Looking for the Cool. I said, I'm going to write 5 days a week. I'm going to post 5 days a week. And I did that for a couple months. But then it got to where I didn't have anything to say every day, and so I just kind of stepped back and I said, when I got something to talk about, I'll post it up. And if I don't, it's okay. And like right now, I'm marinating on Luke Cage because I'm 4 episodes in and I really like it. And it's hitting me in so many different ways that I can't yet clarify all my ideas.
It's got a process.
Yeah. So, and that's only 4 episodes in, so I'm really looking forward to writing about that. And actually this morning on Facebook, I posted just a brief piece. Yeah, I've been down with Luke Cage since 1972 when I bought the comic, and here's a link to a piece that I wrote last December on the blog about the TV show. It's kind of a Luke Cage 101. So there's more stuff to come. It just depends. It just takes a while, and I find that while I'm not a political person, the politics of the day are really disturbing, not just the presidential race, but, the daily, the daily exhibit of black men getting shot, is a lot, and it's just hard.
It is relentless.
Yeah. And I think about that, and I think about, what is it that I have to say that is useful, that isn't redundant, that isn't me just bitching, and those ideas for me probably take longer to come together than they do for others. When everything went down about Nate Parker and Birth of a Nation, that really bugged me, and it bugged me to the degree that I was able to get out what I thought pretty quickly, but I didn't force it; it just came. So it's a very, very long way of saying whatever's next, I don't really know, but I just try to stay open and let things percolate and see what rises to the top and says, hey, okay, it's time now. Come and look at me.
So if somebody called you and said, listen, I've been reading these things that you've been writing, and we're starting this new thing, and we'd like you to come and head it up and write every day.
Yeah,
you'd have to think about that.
I'd say I can't promise you that every day you will get exactly what you need, but I would give it a shot. Almost all these jobs, I didn't know I could do them, but I thought I could. I didn't see why I couldn't, so.
Yeah. I'm saying this because based upon your experience, it's highly likely that someone will listen to this podcast and call you and say, I didn't know you'd be interested.
Hey.
And then it'll be part of another podcast years down the road where you say, well, I was on this little podcast, this Blastoff thing.
I think podcasts are the coolest things going. I love the intimacy. I love the opportunity to get people to just kind of relax and talk, and you can really get a better sense of what's going on. I think Mark Maron is just a master at getting people to move past the standard PR trick and really engage. And I think there are a lot of podcasts that do that. So I don't listen to the radio. I'm either listening to an audio book or I'm listening to podcasts in the car.
Yeah. One of the things that we're planning to do is, and we've already started recording these things, is a sort of a comics 101 type of thing where you can learn about the history of comics in short bites on the show, along with an interview segment, and then some retails as well, some of my columns, so that it's about inside the shop too. So we keep the shop element. So we're putting all these elements together.
That's cool.
And making it into something that's probably a little bit of a different experience. The one thing, and the reason why I said what I said to you, the one thing that the feedback that I've gotten is people really want to learn. They really, and the assumption that most people already know, that's not true at all.
Right.
Even the people who are in the comic industry, there's gaps everywhere, gaps of knowledge. There's only a handful of people that I can think of that I would go, they are experts.
Right.
They know more about history than anybody else I know in comics. You know more about film and, of course, music than most people I know. And you write about it. And just to say to you, you might be writing about something that you go, I'm treading, old ground. Well, not for me. I've learned all kinds of things reading your blog. I've learned and shows, music, things that you say, check this out. And I go, and I go and listen to it. And now it's on my playlist at the shop. And other people go, who is this? There is something there. And once you put it out there on the net, it's there forever.
I've been in LA since 90, and I've got a lot of friends, particularly when I was in radio, it was all over the Midwest, and I've got a lot of friends that live in a lot of different places. And with some regularity, somebody will call and say, hey, what are you listening to? Or, hey, I want to go to, me and the missus finally got a free night. We're going to go to the movies. What should we check out? Or I know you're heavy on the TV. What should we be looking at? So I never write as a Bible. Just as it's more my intention is always, hey, here's something I'm enjoying right now. Maybe you'll like it. Check it out. If you don't, you don't. But if you kind of have a sense of what my taste and sensibility are, you might want to look at this. You might want to give it a shot. And the thing that's been most gratifying about the blog is that I've got friends that aren't into comic books at all that have checked out some things because, they read on the blog and the way I wrote it didn't make it feel like it was exclusionary to people that weren't normally into comics.
Right.
So I've got a number of friends that shot me a text last night about they watched the first episode of Luke Cage, like, yo, man, this is hot. I know you've been championing this thing for a while, and this is really good, and that's cool because they are people that otherwise would not have watched it. Just, it's a comic book. I don't even want to know about it, So to do that, to introduce people into something that they normally wouldn't have checked out and for them to like it is really cool. I'm
still really shocked at how the world has caught up. And, me riding my Huffy, being chased by the bullies, my comics flying up in the air in the street.
Yeah.
And now those bullies are asking me for a job.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm shocked by it. Not to mention the fact that Luke Cage is I can't believe that it's personified, that you're turning on the TV and you're watching it. Yeah. But he also comes into my shop.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He's a great guy. And I have these like photos of like me with Luke Cage, me with
That's
Black
cool.
Panther, me with like all of these like people that for me, it's a dream come true.
That's cool.
Because, those people are the personification right now of a whole generation of people. Yeah. And I created some kind of environment that both of those people came in because they heard that was the place to go. Those sort of things, it just is proof that I'm on the right path. I'm doing the thing I was supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And making that happen. And it's primarily because of what I know.
Well, I think I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. It's what you know. It's what you represent. It's how you present yourself. You are a fundamentally decent, nice man, and it's easy to be around you, and people like you. And your store is one of the nicest looking, aesthetically comic book stores I've ever seen. And it's always comfortable to go in there, so I think that part of it is what you know, but there's a lot more to it than just what you know. That all circles back to you, all points back to you.
That's wow, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was really nice to hear.
That's for real. So, it's Sybil, my wife, she's not into comics, but she's an enthusiast for whatever I'm enthusiastic about. I mean, she's like gung ho. And the day that I took her into the shop and you met her and we left, she's like, she said, he's a great guy. That's such a cool store. It's just, I could have spent a couple hours in there just looking around because of the way everything is laid out, so presentation isn't everything, but presentation is a lot.
Oh, sure it is. It says the man who talks about the right clothes and the right bags and the right shoes and the right,
But I got to jump back for a minute. I'm struggling with this new Black Panther run. I'm hoping that I decided that I'm going to wait.
Do you think Ta-Nehisi Coates is like sort of?
I'm going to wait until the story's complete, and then hopefully it'll be collected into one. I know the first trade is out now, but hopefully it'll be collected into a bound volume of all 12 issues. And in that read, maybe it'll come together better. But I'm struggling with it. I mean, I kind of get what he's doing, but it's really dense, and it really, for me, doesn't feel like the Black Panther. And it's not bad. And I don't, that's why I say I'm struggling with it. I'm not saying that it sucks or I don't like it. I'm just having trouble getting my arms around it. Whereas Power Man and Iron Fist, boom.
Well, that's because it's about Power Man and Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Whereas Black Panther's a book of ideas. It's
Exactly.
about Wakanda and politics, social politics.
Yeah.
And that's who they hired.
Yeah.
What did we expect? Did we expect, Black Panther in the city?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what I expected. And I'm glad he's doing it.
Yeah.
But I'm just struggling with it.
It was amazing how many people came into the store based on his name for the first couple of issues. People who would never. They don't even know what they're doing in there. Like,
Right.
Where is it? What do I do? They're probably not even sure how to read it.
Right.
The problem is they don't realize. Like, I had people come in a couple days later going, "Do you have the next one?" I'm like, "It's a monthly book. Comics come out every month."
Yeah.
And then that sort of, I'm supposed to come back and come back and come back, and this is something he wants to do for a while. To have longevity, to have runs like Bendis and Brubaker and people who know how to have 5-6 year plans.
Dude, Brubaker's Cap run is, if that's not my favorite run of a book in the last 10 or 15 years, I don't know what else it would be.
Yeah.
He just nailed it. He nailed it. I was really glad to get to work with him when I was at Crackle, and he's a great guy. I like him a lot. He actually came up with this great concept for Carl Weathers, and Carl was on board to do it, and then my boss got laid off, and then the guy that came in after him was just very, very gun shy, so we didn't get to do it, but it would have been a great piece in that Brubaker style.
Brubaker, Weathers, Stratford. That's it. That's what we need to see.
The piece was called DOA.
Of course it was.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
Yeah. Oh, well.
So we didn't even get to talk about your art collection and your comic book art, your love of comic book art.
Yeah,
Is your stuff still up on Comic Art Fans? Put your stuff up there?
Yes,
Okay.
it's still up. I'm not collecting as much now. One, I've got a lot of art in portfolios, and it's like if you can't look at it regularly on the wall, what's really the point? So the only thing I really collect now is Cho, and that's because Cho's a buddy. So he'll send me stuff, and I love his art. And I used to collect Darwin a lot, and Darwin gave me stuff too. And I went to his memorial a couple of weeks ago over in Burbank, and really well attended. Really well attended. But yeah, I love the original art. I just need more wall space.
Well, you're getting a new place. So.
Yeah. It was funny. I was trying to find this one piece to show Sybil, and I ran across it today. It's in a bound book of different artists did Batman for me, and Jim Lee did a great Batman for me. But the crown piece is a color painted illustration that Galassi did of Batman kissing Catwoman in the shadows.
Ooh.
And it's totally colored. It's just, and Sybil looked at it. She's like, "You got to take that out of the book. We got to frame that and put it up because it's just a beautiful piece."
More proof that she's the right woman for you.
She's so the right one. She's so the right one for so many reasons. Yeah.
One of the reasons why I'm doing this is I want it to be inspirational for people. We live in Steel Town, and with the entertainment being the steel. The people listening for inspiration, people listening for experience, and if for nothing else, proof that this thing can happen. You can have a career. You can honestly, and just to bring up things that maybe are controversial. This town is filled with black men who don't believe that they can get a studio job, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why. So, nobody talks about it, but it's true. And you came up from a time where it had to be even harder to weave through the percentages to get to where
you are now. And I suppose is the message. You're relentlessly immersed in what you love, and it's all about your choices, and you're acting on your choices, the talent, the opportunities that you have in front of you. Or is it random? Is it something that is left to fate?
I don't think it's random. I definitely don't think it's random. I think that when you find something that you love, and if you can imagine how there's a career in it, then if you can move out of the lane of why you can't and get yourself into the lane of, well, if I apply myself and if I know what I need to know, there's no reason why I can't, then the likelihood of you being able to get in are better. I mean, none of my jobs did I think about, well, there aren't many black guys doing this. I didn't think about that at all. You know, what I thought about was, wow, I love this and I know this and I know that I know this and I'm enthusiastic about it. So if I can present myself appropriately and if I can articulate both my passion and my enthusiasm and my understanding of the financial bottom line, there's really no reason why I can't get it if there's an opportunity, you know. But it's I think a lot of times it's so far out, it feels so far out of reach because you don't know where to start, that it's easier to just say, well, it wouldn't have happened anyway. But, you know, I don't know. I think now, like, my God, it's just like anything that you're interested in, you can find out about without leaving your house.
Right.
And it wasn't that way when I was a kid. You know, it was like, if I knew comic book artists when I was a kid, if I knew that how to get access to these communities of artists, of writers, or whatever that existed, and found out how they did it and what they went through and this and that, I might have taken a totally different path. But when I was growing up, there wasn't cable until I was in college. You know, so the idea of the internet, forget about it. But right now, it's like if you're interested in being a chemical engineer in Slovakia, you can Google it and you can find out about it.
Right.
You know, so it's like, to me, you got to start with a real passion and a real interest. And then if you have that, just chase it as hard as you can and as far as you can, you know, and what other people think don't really matter. If you can see yourself doing it, it doesn't really matter what other people think. And they may be right sometimes, you may be wrong, but there's learning from that, and you apply the learning the next time you make your move.
I hope that there's inspiration out there. I mean, there certainly is a lot of inspiration out there, but that people can hear it. I see thousands and thousands of people through my stores over the years, and it's amazing how many are unsure.
Yeah.
Unsure based upon what they see, what's happening in the world right now, what's happening in our country right now, where this is what we see every day. You talk about it. We look at it. We open our computers. We look at our phones right when we get up in the morning, and we see things that we go, that can't be. That cannot be in our country right now. And it is. It's right there, front and center. And there's a whole generation of young people that are watching it and going, and that's supposed to be their inspiration every day.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anger and animosity.
But, you know, I tell you, when I was in radio, my first program director, when I was a part-timer, he was a dick. He was just a dick. And I had limited work experience. So I thought, well, you know, that's just how it is. That's just how it is when you manage people and this and that. And then when I graduated from college and went to Cincinnati, program director was like the coolest guy I'd ever met. Just a nice guy, just supportive, just encouraging. He wasn't threatened. And I realized, okay, there's a choice. You don't have to be any one way. You know, you can choose the way that you want to be. And so when I got an opportunity to program, you know, I chose that path. I didn't choose the dick path. And I think it's a simplified idea, but I think it's that way in life. You know, there's a choice as to how you want to respond to the external things that are put before you. You know, you can get pissed and fold up or say this sucks and it's not going to change, or you can just say, okay, well, this is what this is, but I want my reality to be different. So how do I make my reality different? You know, and then you put the energy in, and I think if your intention is right and the action supports the intention, ultimately it pays off. Maybe not exactly the way you want, when you want, but it takes you farther down the road and closer to what you want to get to than if you just buy into, you know, everything else is going on. I mean, when I was, even now, you know, I'll run into guys in radio or records and they've been in it for a long time and they're like, oh man, what am I going to do? I'm at the end of the road, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, but your skills are transferable. You know, you are a marketer, you are a promoter. You know, this was just the radio industry, but these skills still have applications in other industries. You have to think beyond the confines of what everyone else in your circle has been saying for years, you know, so it's, you know, we limit ourselves, you know, and we can choose not to limit ourselves, you know, which doesn't mean that you make the choice and then everything gets easy. It can get harder, but at least it's a conscious choice and you're moving in a direction that you want to move in, not a direction that you feel like you're going in because you have no other choice, if that makes any sense.
Can you teach self-worth?
I think you can point out self-worth. You know, I think you can encourage self-worth. You know, I think you can support self-worth, but you know, ultimately the person's got to get there on his or her own, you know, but you can put yourself in a position and in an environment where self-worth can be nurtured, or you can put yourself in a position in an environment where self-worth is stomped, if you allow it. You know, I mean, reality is it's just, you know, living this life isn't easy. It's just, life is just hard. But within the difficulty, you know, there are those moments of bliss, and there are those moments of where you feel nothing but being grateful, you know. So, but I remember,
are you feeling that at all now?
Always. I mean, you know, I didn't think at this stage of my life that I would be married to, you know, like the best partner that I could have, you know. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to be healthy. I mean, to live in a year where we lose Prince, David Bowie, Muhammad Ali, you know, those are big gut punches.
Yeah.
So I've just got gratitude. You know, I just got gratitude. And Darwin.
And Darwin too.
And
yeah.
Darwin. My God.
From all walks of life, we got hit this past year. Well, I'm grateful that you came and did this today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to keep on you about being some kind of teacher, man. Because there's a whole lot of people that could use some of this wisdom.
Well, my therapist thinks I should be a psychotherapist, but I don't see that happening.
It's called an interviewer. You're like, I've been doing that for many, many years.
Yeah. No, this is great. You're my dude. You've been my dude for a long time, so I was honored and more than happy to do it.
Thank you. Well, next time we'll talk more about comics.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir.
The Blastoff podcast is produced by the Colonel, Jeff Fox, Scott Tipton, and me. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Anthony Gray. You can find more of his musical compositions on his website, DerekAnthonyGray.com.
For more information about anything you've heard us talk about today, check us out online at BlastoffComics.com. We have an active Facebook presence, so check us out over there on Facebook. And you can reach us on Twitter at BlastoffComics or on Instagram.
Or you can come by our retail location in North Hollywood in the heart of the Arts District, 5118 Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, just 2 blocks south of Magnolia. See you soon.